Historically, the American Democratic Party has been associated with the ideology of liberalism, while the Republican Party has been associated with conservatism. But with the political volatility of the past decade, these ideological descriptions may no longer accurately represent the aims of the respective parties. In the opening months of the second Trump presidency, we are in the midst of a strange historical phenomenon where the so-called conservatives are calling to tear down the whole system. In other words, liberate the United States from traditional institutions. Meanwhile, the so-called liberals argue that the established systematic precedents must be conserved, as we must not allow drastic change to our traditional institutions. This blatant inversion of the underlying principles defining the opposing ideologies has many wondering what is going on in American politics. Let's begin by examining the defining traits of the ideologies of liberalism and conservatism. Traditionally, liberalism is defined by the idea that individual liberties are to be prioritized, while conservatism is the belief that priority should be allocated toward collective stability. While liberalism views individuals as rational beings capable of governing themselves, conservatism views humans as fundamentally flawed and incapable of making their own choices without some form of structural guidelines imposed from a centralized government. Liberals tend to view the state as a necessary evil, while conservatives view the state as the arbiter of morality. Because of this, classical liberals advocated for minimal government interference in the lives of everyday people, while conservatives have traditionally advocated for broad government oversight. These principles can be found when looking at policies backed by classical liberals in the 20th century, such as the hippie movement and the civil rights movement, both defined by the rebellious themes of fighting back against authority and top-down government control over people's choices. On the contrary, traditional conservatives fought for the government control over social issues, such as the banning of gay marriage and drugs like marijuana and LSD, while promoting a powerful central government with vast regulatory abilities. When it comes to economics, it has historically been liberals who have fought for free market capitalism, while conservatives emphasize the importance of government intervention. Liberals have always been advocates for diversity and acceptance when it comes to social and cultural issues, while conservatives have prioritized merit-based hierarchies and the importance of virtue. Liberals have also backed cosmopolitan views on foreign policy, while conservatives have aligned more with nationalistic views. When it comes to designing our education systems, a liberal view would likely put more emphasis on critical thinking and problem-solving, while conservatives saw education systems as mechanisms to instill virtue. As you may have noticed, the current positions of the Democrat and Republican parties in the United States do not accurately align with these ideologies. When it comes to the core priority, it is often the Republican Party who is associated with individual liberties, such as freedom of speech, while the Democrats have been the party fighting on behalf of censorship as a means of combating hate speech and misinformation with the aim of maintaining collective stability. This can best be viewed using the COVID-19 pandemic as a prime example. During the pandemic, it was the Democrats who advocated for vaccine passports, shutdowns of small businesses, and mask mandates, under the assumption that these policies were necessary because of the inherent flaws in human nature. Meanwhile, Republicans suggested leaving these issues up to individuals, under the implication that individuals were rational beings capable of governing themselves. Republicans often expressed rhetoric that government overreach should be minimized, as allowing government too much power over the everyday lives of the people would put the country at risk of authoritarian oppression, while Democrats looked to expand government power, viewing all of those who opposed government authority as the true threats. The same is occurring in 2025, as Donald Trump and Elon Musk seek to cut government spending and shrink the size of the federal government from the Republican side of the aisle. While Democrats seek to expand government programs and involve government in more aspects of society, such as healthcare and home building, over recent years, Republicans have often been viewed as the party of free market capitalism and deregulation of the domestic economy, while prominent Democrat candidates have advocated for increased use of socialism, universal basic income, and redistributive taxes. When it comes to social issues, it is true that the Democrats in recent years have fought for social justice and diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, while Republicans have sided with arguments for maintaining merit-based principles when it comes to hiring practices and institutional acceptance. Democrats also tend to believe in cosmopolitan positions on foreign policy, such as lending and investing in foreign nations, while Republicans take a more nationalistic stance, using America First-style rhetoric to argue for prioritizing the needs of American people over the needs of foreign allies. Finally, when it comes to education, although both parties tend to oscillate between liberal and conservative thinking, it is more often the Republicans who express dissatisfaction with public schools and universities, using their influence to attempt to instill virtue in students, and instead believe schools should focus on developing students' abilities to think critically. The Democrats, on the other hand, tend to express the importance of our schooling systems instilling students with empathetic and inclusive virtues. As we can see, the liberal and conservative ideologies no longer properly align with the Democrat and Republican Party. But this begs the question, what has changed in recent years to cause this ideological shift? What actually are the underlying philosophies motivating the strong and divisive positions among the opposing political parties? Surely there must be some fundamental difference in ideology or societal aims that is driving such a political divide within the United States. But if the internal division is not actually stemming from philosophical differences between liberalism and conservatism, what is actually happening? The answer lies in the emerging phenomenon known as the Globalization Trilemma. The Globalization Trilemma, also known as Rodrik's Trilemma, is an idea proposed by economist Danny Rodrik, describes a phenomenon between three concepts: 1. Economic globalization, 2. National sovereignty, and 3. Democratic politics. A trilemma refers to a scenario in which three desirable features are possible, but only two can be optimized for, at the sacrifice of the third. Much of our modern political division stems from disagreements on which of these three features is to be sacrificed in pursuit of the other two. First, let's define each of these three features, beginning with national sovereignty. Imagine a land enclosed by borders and recognized by the world. Inside those borders lives a population with shared traditions, a common language, and a deep sense of collective identity. This is not just a random grouping of people. This is defined as a nation-state. A nation-state is a political entity that merges two powerful concepts: the nation, a people with shared cultural elements like language, religion, history, or ethnicity, and the state, a political structure with government institutions that exercise authority over a specific territory. When those two align, and when the people who see themselves as a unified group also govern themselves within defined borders, you have a nation-state. National sovereignty means that a nation-state has the full right and power to govern itself without outside interference. It can make and enforce laws, control its borders, manage its economy, and decide how it interacts with other countries. In essence, sovereignty is the authority of a state to be the boss of its own house. The next concept is that of political democracy. At its heart, political democracy is the idea that government should reflect the will of the people. Rather than power being inherited, seized, or handed down from the divine, democracy insists that authority must be granted by the citizens, usually through free and fair elections. The leaders are servants, not rulers, chosen for a term and held accountable by those who elected them. But democracy isn't just about voting. It's a whole political culture. It thrives when people have the freedom to speak, to organize, to protest, and to question authority without fear. It requires transparency, checks and balances, and independent institutions that prevent any one person or group from becoming too powerful. In a true political democracy, the rules don't change just because those in power want them to. The system is based on a constitution or set of laws that apply equally to all, even to the leaders themselves. It's not about the loudest voice, but about ensuring that every voice counts, even those that challenge the status quo. There are many forms of democracy: direct, representative, parliamentary, presidential. But the core principle is the same. The people govern themselves, sometimes directly, often through elected officials, but always with the understanding that legitimacy comes from below, not above. The third node of the trilemma is globalization. Globalization refers to the growing interdependence of countries through economic, technological, cultural, and political exchanges. It has been fueled by rapid advances in communication, transportation, and digital technologies. A decision made in Tokyo can ripple across Wall Street. A factory in Mexico might be owned by a company based in Germany. A protest in one country might inspire activists in another within hours thanks to social media. Although economic globalization existed in some form for centuries, the interconnectedness of the global economy began to grow rapidly following World War II. beginning with the famous Bretton Woods Conference of 1945. It was here that the new global economic structure was formulated and new international organizations were formed. The International Monetary Fund was established to help support global monetary cooperation, provide funding and financial assistance to countries in need, and stabilize exchange rates between currencies. The World Bank was also established at Bretton Woods as a funding mechanism to help war-torn and underdeveloped countries. These two international organizations were originally viewed as platforms for governments to cooperate and avoid future warfare. Their structure, however, held many similarities to the structure of governments themselves. They had authority positions such as presidents and boards of governors. Over the following years, many more international organizations were developed, such as the World Trade Organization and the World Health Organization. With new technology and intercontinental cooperation, corporations now saw exponential growth in international expansion. Companies now operate across the globe, rather than simply remaining within their home states. In many ways, globalization has brought remarkable opportunities: economic growth through access to global markets, technological innovation shared across borders, cultural exchange that allows people to learn from one another, cooperation on global issues like climate change or pandemics. But according to Rodrik's Trilemma, the emergence of advanced globalization may be a double-edged sword. Political democracy, national sovereignty, and globalization are all desirable features for societal cohesion. But according to Rodrik's Trilemma, all three of them cannot simultaneously exist. Here is why. Prior to advanced globalization, national sovereignty and democracy worked in harmony, as national governments crafted their own constitutions and politicians were accountable to their constituents. But now, as global entities have transformed into governing bodies of their own, national governments often find themselves between a rock and a hard place. When a situation arises in which there is a conflict between the wishes of the people and the wishes of the global governing bodies, national governments are faced with a scenario in which three possible solutions exist. Option 1 would be to ignore the wishes of the people and instead act in the interest of global cooperation, in effect, abandoning democratic principles. This is easy to accomplish in authoritarian or communist nation states such as China, where political democracy does not exist, and the national government is able to maintain both its national sovereignty and its participation in the global economy. Option 2 would be for national governments to maintain both political democracy and global cooperation by dissolving their own national political powers and handing over governing authority to the global governing organizations, in effect, eliminating national sovereignty. In this scenario, national governments would be consolidated into international unions, and democratic politics could be maintained, although the previously defining features of each participating nation, such as secure borders, national currency, and independent self-governance, would be sacrificed. A recent example of this can be seen in Europe, where independent nations, in an attempt to maintain international peace, order, and democracy, allowed for power to be revoked from individual national governments and given instead to the newly consolidated governing body, the European Union. The third option would be for the national government to act on behalf of its domestic constituents and ignore the wishes of the global governing entities, in effect, sacrificing participation in the global economy in order to maintain both democracy and national sovereignty. This is what we are currently seeing in the United States under the Trump administration, as international agreements and economic norms are being dismissed in order to prioritize domestic concerns. The Democrats envision a future in which democracy and globalization are combined at the sacrifice of national sovereignty. This is clear when examining recent political positions taken by Democrats. To the dismay of Republicans, Democrats have recently taken stances against the Pledge of Allegiance in schools. They have swapped out American flags for flags representing multiculturalism. They have called for the removal of patriotic statues and the rebranding of government buildings named after American historical figures. They have renamed traditionally acknowledged American holidays to represent a less nationalistic and more cosmopolitan theme, such as changing Columbus Day to Indigenous Peoples Day. These attempts to mitigate the level at which national pride is entrenched in American culture are presented by the Democrats as a battle against systemic racism, while Republicans label this as a domestic attack on American culture. The real aim, however, is to move toward a more globalized government and mitigate the power and influence of the nation-state. In order to make progress in this direction, obstacles such as national pride, history, traditions, and culture must first be dismantled. The same is true regarding the border and immigration. The Democrats in recent years have advocated for open or flexible borders, while the Trump administration has been centered around the idea of strong border security. The Democrats have also pushed to allow voting in elections without proof of citizenship, while Republicans have pushed back, emphasizing the importance of voter ID to maintain election security. Republicans claim Democrats are threatening democracy by allowing non-citizens to enter the country illegally and then vote in national elections. The Democrats, in return, label the Republicans as the real threats to democracy, claiming that voter ID laws are inherently racist and qualify as a form of voter suppression. The truth is, both of these accusations are misleading, as both sides push for policies that aim to maintain democracy. In reality, Democrats' policies are not threats to democracy, but threats to national sovereignty. Similarly, Republicans' policies are not threats to democracy, but threats to globalization. By shifting the ideological framework from the traditional lens of liberalism versus conservatism to one of globalism versus nationalism, the policy positions of the Democratic and Republican parties begin to align more coherently with their underlying worldviews. In today's political landscape, modern Democrats prioritize global cooperation and interconnectedness, while modern Republicans emphasize national sovereignty and self-reliance. These divergent perspectives stem from fundamentally different interpretations of international engagement. Democrats often view global institutions such as the United Nations, the World Health Organization, and various climate coalitions as essential partners in promoting peace, sustainability, and progress. Their policies tend to favor deeper integration with global systems, even when doing so may require compromising certain domestic interests. Republicans, by contrast, maintain a more skeptical stance toward global organizations, often perceiving them as threats to national autonomy and vehicles for foreign influence. Their approach places domestic priorities at the forefront, even at the cost of global cooperation. The divide extends to economic policy as well. Democrats often support funding international development projects and maintaining reliance on foreign investment to manage national debt, arguing that these relationships deepen interdependence and promote global stability. Republicans, by contrast, seek to reduce foreign aid, end military interventions abroad, and shrink the trade deficit, all in pursuit of economic independence and a more self-sustaining national economy. Because Democrats view global institutions as engines of progress, they tend to place a high degree of trust in global elites, international experts, and transnational bodies. This faith in institutional authority often shapes their rhetoric and policy advocacy. Democratic leaders and voters frequently echo slogans such as "trust the science," underscoring their belief in expert consensus, especially when it comes from respected international or academic circles. Their arguments often appeal to authority, emphasizing the judgments of global specialists and professional organizations. Republicans, by contrast, approach global expertise and institutional narratives with a healthy, sometimes intense, skepticism. They are far more likely to question the motives behind multinational corporations, global bureaucracies, and elite-run media outlets. Phrases like fake news and deep state propaganda are employed not only to critique perceived media bias, but also to frame the broader global information ecosystem as detached from the everyday realities and interests of average citizens. This contrast also manifests in foreign policy. Democrats generally favor diplomacy, compromise, and international coalition building. They are more willing to yield partial autonomy in exchange for multilateral cooperation, believing that such alliances promote long-term peace and progress. Republicans, on the other hand, have embraced a doctrine of strategic autonomy, prioritizing national self-interest and leverage over global consensus. Policies such as tariffs, withdrawal from international pacts, and unilateral negotiations reflect this mindset. The same divide can be seen in cultural and educational spheres. Democrats advocate for multiculturalism in education, emphasizing global awareness, diversity, and the deconstruction of traditional national narratives. Their aim is to produce citizens who are globally conscious and socially inclusive. Republicans, however, push for a renewed focus on national pride, civic heritage, and patriotic instruction. They argue that preserving national identity, history, and cultural continuity is essential to fostering unity and maintaining a stable democratic society. Democrats have advocated for more open immigration policies and the loosening of national borders, believing that, in an increasingly interconnected world, the nation-state may no longer be the most effective framework for upholding democracy. In their view, a borderless or minimally bordered world fosters inclusion, cooperation, and shared responsibility. Republicans reject this notion, insisting that strong, well-defined borders are essential to maintaining democratic governance, national identity, and internal stability. From their perspective, the erosion of national boundaries dilutes the power of the citizenry and threatens the legitimacy of democratic institutions. As we can see, the American political parties hold much more coherent and consistent positions on issues when the ideological battle is viewed through the lens of nationalism versus globalism, as opposed to liberalism versus conservatism. This ongoing tension between globalism and nationalism, between trusting the international order and defending the sovereign state, continues to shape every major policy debate in American politics today. If you find yourself agreeing with the nationalist point of view, you are in luck, as the Trump administration has been consistent in their messaging that they intend to continue taking a hard nationalist stance, focusing on America's national sovereignty and rejecting the authority of global institutions. But don't hold your head just yet if you side with a more globalist view, as it is highly likely that globalism will emerge victorious in the long term. As technology progresses, economic activity multiplies, and conditions around the world continue to develop, expansion of global governance is an inevitability on a long enough timescale. The global economy is, after all, a network, and just like all networks, its value will increase exponentially as more countries integrate and participate in global commerce. Nationalist policies, although well-intentioned and effective, can only delay the consolidation of government, as isolation from the global trade network is a self-defeating strategy in the long run, and competitive incentive structures are a powerful force in the push toward global government.